day 2 on Twitter. If you watch my prior video, it's kind of my first real endeavor into engaging on Twitter. And I kind of gave my thoughts yesterday, so I kind of want to do the same and give my thoughts on day 2 here. And it's a bit of a different feel than I have at the end of day 2. I would summarize it or explain it as depressed, discouraged a bit. I follow a bunch of different people, a lot of political leaders, thought leaders, influencers, trying to follow a lot of people that have strong opinions, because in many ways that's what I want to see. I want to learn from them. I want to see how they think. I want to see their views. So it's a little skewed in the sample I have, probably. So the depression, the discouraged feeling is a little skewed in that. But I mean, I guess there's a few reasons as to why that is. Most significantly is just the sheer volume of tweets and just, communication on there, and the nature of it is particularly depressing for me. As someone, as you've seen through these videos, that just thinks it's so important, regardless of your views. It doesn't matter your views. It doesn't matter where you sit on the policies, whether they be social, political, economic. Everybody's entitled to their own views on that. But the way in which you think about them and communicate them is what I really care about. Are you questioning yourself? Are you challenging yourself? Are you entertaining the possibility that it may be a different way and that somebody else's views might be, okay, or give something new that you haven't thought of? Or even if they aren't, they're bad, they're still okay. Are you being empathetic? Are you practicing humility? Are you trying to avoid certainty? Are you trying to identify your blind spots and your biases? All these things that I talk about, when I spend a day like today on Twitter, it's almost the exact opposite. You see so much that is not that. You see so much that is people tweeting extreme, exaggerated, declarative, certain, conclusions of what is going on whatever topic. They are so certain, seemingly. They are so, the hyperbole, the exaggeration in how they speak. And I guess the worst part of it being, that's the nature of the game on there, is that's what's rewarded. That's what people want to see. So that's what people do. And there's all sorts of analytics and tracking that shows you what gets the most attention and what tweets get the most likes or responses or retweets, whatever. And naturally, it would appear it's those people. So you just get this kind of feedback loop of people just spewing out, almost shouting, as loud and as emotionally charged and as passionate as they can, with seemingly very little self-reflection, very little questioning. And you see it from political leaders. You see it from, like I said, all sorts of public figures and influencers and different types of people. And then obviously you see it from their followers as well. I spend a lot of time in the threads, right? I don't get much response or interaction, if any, with the actual, blue checkmark people. But their followers I've been interacting with a bit. And it's not, particularly with the followers, I find that the blue checkmark people are the ones that are typically like the most hostile. The followers, at least through 2 days, the people that are tweeting on the threads, I don't find them to be hostile. But it's just the way in which they're communicating. Again, the way in which they appear to be thinking and communicating just seems very broken on that platform and in that medium. There's lots of information being quote unquote shared, but I quote unquote shared because shared kind of implies there's 2 people involved. It's going back and forth, but it's not really what it seems to be and how it seems to work. Although there are, replies and all that stuff, it's very much a one-way conversation for everybody, or a lot of people, is what you see. The insults go back and forth to an extent, but the views, the opinions, it's just people putting out their views and opinions, and then somebody else puts it out, and less of a response to it, but just, okay, your view or opinion is that, here's my view or opinion. Not a dialogue, not a conversation, which helps to drive that reflection and that questioning. And when you think about that and think about if that's in any way a representation of the state of our society or our country or the world, it's concerning. It's depressing. It's discouraging. It feels like there's so much work to be done. And again, there's so many different topics: social, political, economic, you name it. And across the board, you have all these people communicating and thinking in that way. And it's just like, do people, is there effective communication in any form that happens on there? You have the extremes, like extreme conspiracy theories and just people trolling and doing that stuff. But even if you eliminate for that, which is seemingly a significant chunk of it, even the people just engaging in true, communication, there's so little substance to it. There's so little actual discussion to it. It really is just a game of people trying to gain followers and gain influence and gain attention. And when you play that game, again, the rules of that game are very different than the rules I try and live by in terms of thinking better and being better. So it's discouraging. It's depressing. I'm not going to stop. Obviously, I want to keep learning. I feel like in some ways it's a process you have to go through. I've talked a lot on these videos of late of trying to get more external. Right? I sit here and I talk to the camera in the video, and I talk to other people that I know directly, but it's isolated. I need to understand what's actually going on in the masses for this to be effective in any way, because I could sit here every day for the rest of my life talking about these concepts, and maybe hopefully I'll be a much better person because of it. But what does that do? What's the impact that has? What's the point of that externally if I can't figure out a way to try and do something to make the world maybe a slightly better place? Not to say, who am I to do that, but I think that's all of our goals, or should be to some extent. If we have some skill or some knowledge on something, not in a conceited way, but in a productive way, you should try and share that. So I have to get into the muck. I have to get into the mud. I have to get into Twitter and other places like that and really understand what the dynamics are. And it's day 2, so I don't fully understand them yet. And there's probably a similar progression as you would like a grieving cycle. Of yesterday, it was more kind of just shock and amazement and, oh wow, this is new and this is different. And then you go to the next stage, which is like, this is tough. This is tough. There's a lot of bad here. And then hopefully you kind of work your way through that. So I'm trying to keep that in mind. And, to be fair, I think part of it also is, as I mentioned, just the sheer volume of communication and tweets. It goes against human nature a little bit. We talk a lot about how our minds want a cohesive narrative. They want things to make sense. And when you have that much volume, that much information being poured out in so many different directions, you can't make sense of it. You just can't. And I think that leaves at least me feeling a little bit like, what do I do with this? What do I make of it? What's the story? What's the theme? And there isn't one. And that's troubling. Not necessarily rational, but troubling. So I think that adds to it. I think there's also a component, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember reading an article within the last couple of years about social media. I think it was referring to Facebook directly, but it was the idea that, I don't remember the number, but say the average person has 300 friends on Facebook, how that was kind of unnatural for humans. The circle of people in which kind of your social circle that you interact with is meant to be much smaller. And I forget exactly the science or whatever it was behind it, but the concept was like, that's not natural. It should be 30 people, let's say, instead of 300. You go on Twitter and it's obviously it's not really your social circle in terms of people that but you do interact with millions of people in theory. You're reading millions of tweets just flooding you at all times, and then responses and all that. And I can't help but feel that there's a dynamic there that I need to think about more, but that is a problem, where when that many people are, in some ways, engaging each other, maybe not in a very good way, but are engaging each other, there's maybe something bad about that, because it seems to feed off each other, right? There's almost this nature of it where it's like, when you heat something up and like the atoms start going and they start banging into each other and kind of going back and forth, you kind of feel that on Twitter, just the tension, and it feeds off itself, and it's building and there's so much there. And as people are trying to get more likes and more tweets and everybody's shouting and putting out their views, it feels like it's gonna combust, it's gonna explode. And I think that unnatural nature of it is what's heating it. That's what's heating it all up. It's just our minds aren't equipped to handle that. And when you start seeing so much there, it does something to you. So again, these are kind of just raw thoughts about it on day 2. I am depressed, I am discouraged, but hoping that's part of the process, and hoping that, as I continue to interact in some places, to try and focus on the positives, where there's some good interactions, some good dialogue, some good learnings that come from it, and keeping that mindset. So we'll continue and kind of we'll share more as I go through it, but that's the thoughts on day 2.